More on the Self-Evident Podcast. Welcome to the Self-Evident Podcast. You got Mike. Not here yet, Massey, but you're stuck with me for just a little bit longer, and then we'll be back to it. The two of us hammering it hard right now. He is on his way back from Missouri. So if you were out at the Missouri Convention, if you were at First Baptist in Canton, by all means, say hi to us, reach out. Also think about becoming a monthly Torchbearer member. But we are so glad that we get to travel a nation, teaching about Constitution, the Founding Fathers, biblical influence on America, and most importantly, the fact that without Christ, what's it worth, right? And before I talk about should women really be in sports, what's the role of women, blah, 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 go to theselfevidenttruth.com, get yourself a t-shirt, get yourself some merch, a book perhaps, and think about becoming a monthly sponsor. I'll stop. Sorry. Just too much fun. Anyways, one of the cool things about being able to do a podcast like this is sometimes you don't even need to prepare. And I'm not saying that I don't want to prepare for you guys, but I was driving in this morning. I was listening to another podcast, and the topic was interesting to me, and I'm going to go off the cuff and just kind of talk a little bit. So if you're not into just hearing somebody's thoughts about a kind of salacious idea, then by all means, skip to one of our other podcast episodes. Enjoy. But if you're interested about what I'm talking about, because I've been a little bit cryptic and dropped the bait, I talked last Monday that there seems to be this men's biblical movement or men's Christian movement. And I've noticed that it's kind of worked its way through the Catholic thread. And I was listening to a podcast called The Culture War. If you've known me for any length of time, I'm a big Tim Pool fan. I like the conversations they have on there. I think they talk about topics I care about. I don't always agree with Tim Pool, but fairly reasonable, well thought out, smart guy. And on The Culture War, they talk about cultural topics. And of course, you had a couple of guys on there from very much the men's movement, I guess you would call them. And they got into this topic about women and what a woman's real role is and the idea of equality and gynocentrism in our society and all of that. And I'll kind of lay it all out. But I want to start with this premise of, do you notice, and I think the more fundamentalist elements of Christianity are also witnessing this uptick or this rise in what's called the trad men's movement. Or you've probably seen the trad women's movement, women who they kind of glorify the dream of the 50s woman cooking, cleaning, waiting for her husband to get home, all of that. And I don't make judgments one way or another on that. Do what you want to do. Look, if that's how you want to fulfill what you've been called to do in your role, by all means. And I tend to lean more that way than a woman is meant to be a partner at a law firm for 100 hours a week, making high six figures and sacrificing her family and her body and her life for a corporate structure. However, what I find interesting is that this trad men's movement seems to be coming up out of the Catholic and the more fundamentalist ranks, which tends to be an authoritarian hierarchy mindset. And one of the guys that he had on there, Tim Pool had on there, was Timothy Gordon. And this is not a put him on blast thing. He was espousing a view, and I want to put a response or a thought to it. But I find it interesting that the structure that a lot of these guys are working from, that I've noticed at least, tends to work from an authoritarian hierarchical structure, which makes sense. And he even put that forward, that his that we are a hierarchy. Men work in a hierarchy. Women tend to work in a circle. And he's not necessarily wrong about that. But there tends to become a very utilitarian mindset that comes from the more fundamentalist or the deep-rooted Catholic mindset. And it this is going to be the Protestant charismatic in me, but it can go wrong. And what I'm noticing more and more, and kind of raising the flag of, guys, let's be careful here, is the swing back. Now, both of these guys that were on the podcast were talking about the start of the feminist movement, especially in the 1840s, which just so happened coincides with Marxism and, all of that. And what you tend to find is that when a movement comes to counteract something, it comes and it swings too hard to the other side. And I worry that perhaps is what's going to happen, that we're going to miss the balance and we're going to swing. And I'm not saying that there's gender equality in terms of balance where they're both doing the same thing and all. That's a false balance, right? Women should fulfill and actualize what they've been created to do. Men should fulfill and actualize what they've been created to do. Now, how does this bring into men's and women's sports? Timothy Gordon was espousing the view that he has 6 daughters and a son. And for his daughters, he believes that they are to be raised to cook and clean and sew and all of that. And he said, now, if I'm shooting hoops with my son, they'll come out, they'll shoot some hoops, but they get bored with it in 5 minutes. And his thought is, why bother even telling women that they can do sports? Why allow them to do sports when that's not what they're created to do? In a sense, it's a very utilitarian thought process, but his thought process goes further, saying they're created to be cheerleaders. They're created to cheer on the boys as the boys are competing and preparing for, and his thought process, which I don't necessarily disagree with this, is sport was designed to prepare for battle. Now, yes and no. Innate within men is this competition gene, and it varies from man to man, right? And especially men who haven't done well in competition will push away from it, and they'll decide, I'm done with competition. I'm going to go somewhere else. But no matter where you look, even the basement dwellers playing video games are competing on Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever for hours per day. They're competing to win, right? So they found their arena that they want to compete in. War is the ultimate competition. Ultimate risk reward. You win, you get resources, land, you get women, you get power, you get influence, you get control, all of it. You lose, you die. And in men, we have this innate competition gene. Women don't seem to have that same competition gene. It seems to be more relational, and I'm not trying to say every single man or woman is like this, but there seems to be a generalization that you could put over each sex. His point was that since sport was created for war and sport is competition, therefore women really shouldn't be in sports. Shouldn't have women's sports. Shouldn't be pushing women towards sports. Now, what I appreciate is he went forward with this thought process for a while, and Tim Pool started to push back and said, well, I know girls who enjoy sport. And Timothy kind of took the line, and I don't think he was being genuine with himself on this. No, they don't really want to do that. They've just been conditioned to. And Poole was like, no, they actually do. They actually do. So what do you do with that? How do you... And Timothy Gordon's line is, well, with my daughters, I'm the father. I'm directing them. I'm going to guide them to the process that they need to go. AKA, I'm not going to end up letting them do sports, even if they want to, because that's not what's best for them. And I was thinking about this, and I think there can be a dangerous aspect to this, and Timothy Gordon kept coming back to calling conservatives kind of milquetoast, soft, that kind of thing, because they won't go to this line with him. And some conservatives, sure, yeah, well, we got to let women do whatever they want and all that. And to me, They are an actualized individual. They are a human being with sovereignty and individual drive. That individual drive will not always look the same between one person to the next. Now, in the structure of what God intended, man is considered the head of the family. He's the head. But he's called to sacrifice himself in every way for his wife, right? Sacrifice his life. Now, I don't mean sacrifice what's right. There's a difference. However, Christ first appeared to a woman. The first witness of Christ's resurrection was a woman. In that day and age, the testimony of a woman was not considered usable in court. It was not considered trustworthy. He went to the woman as opposed to the hierarchical structure because Christ always did it against the system structure. And you noticed the legal and the religious structure he always pushed against. And in a way, he pushed against the social structure too. He was talking to the Samaritan woman by himself. That wasn't necessarily really a custom thing to do either. And so I posit, yes, sport is a competition of physical and mental prowess and perseverance and tactic and strategy. And yes, it can be used as a preparation tool for war. Sure. I think even just in the down within our soul in men, there is a competition aspect to us, which makes sense from a biological point of view. We're built to protect, to provide, to gather resources, to create stability, to create order out of the chaos that's around us. You need to compete to improve your skill in order to be able to do so. Sure. I don't think that means that it harms a woman to enjoy an aspect of physicality or strategy. Will she be the best? No. And if we're going to take a purely utilitarian view, this becomes very Spartan in its mindset. Now, the thing about the Spartans, super disciplined, everything was utilitarian. You were there for the good of the state. You were there for the good of the authority hierarchy structure. They were successful in war, but they were not ultimately successful in war, and they died out. And it's funny because the utilitarian aspect of them, women were actually expected to be tough and powerful and independent and strong-willed. Women were expected to be strong in order to birth strong men. I don't necessarily think that you pull that all the way to the gross conclusion, right? But I say all this, and I know I'm kind of rambling, but I say this as a commentary on let's be careful of what we try to put on our culture or society as to what's best. And are we going to railroad and destroy people in the process of trying to actualize what we think is the proper structure for society or a culture? And we all have our opinions, and all of us are right in a way and wrong in a way and right in a way and a wrong way, blah, 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 right? Now, you might say, well, the communists are completely wrong. Cooperation does have its value. Putting a person above a resource may have its value. Hear me, right? So I watched this movement, and there's something in me that goes, warning flags, because the road that this goes down becomes destructive in the sense of a man grows in his self-righteousness. And even Paul talks about, look, when we are new in Christ, We're not Greek, we're not Jew, we're not male, we're not female, we're not freed, we're not slave. We're all one in the body. There is still hierarchy. Paul is not, by saying that, nixing what he talked about in Ephesians about the structure of the family. Notice it's the structure of the family. And I understand being a father and directing the passions of your sons and daughters. But here's the trick. They're also individuals. So let's say my son enjoys math. Now, if my personal view is, well, that's math and that's thinking, that's not out chopping wood and that's not hunting deer, and so that's not manly enough, I need to correct that because I'm his father. What I've actually done is I've actually squashed his interests and I've squashed what God's put into him. And from there, we see there's trouble down the road. And we can do that with our daughters too. My wife was a volleyball player. She enjoyed volleyball. She loved volleyball. And guess what? She built an athletic structure in her life to understand what it means to be physical. And she has that potential, that prowess. And I am very convinced that there is a physical effect on genetics over the long term. Now, geneticists, biological experts, you may disagree with me, that's fine. But over the course, if you take two healthy individuals, you're going to create healthy offspring. And I think it helps and aids my son that my wife has been physical. She's understood physicality, she's understood sport, she's understood what it means to push, right? Because she can actually help me convey that to him. Now, you may say, well, that's your job. That's not her job. Her job is to nourish the home. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And she embraces that. And I tell you, she does not embrace working out like she used to. But do I, as a father, if I have a daughter who wants to play a sport, who is geared more that way, it's not conditioning, there is genetic difference between people. Do I do her a service or a disservice if I squash that? If I say, no, you cannot pursue that. Now, I disagree with Timothy. That's okay. And he would disagree with me. He would feel, more than likely, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, that he should be in charge of what his kids want, and they don't necessarily know what's best for them, and he doesn't feel sport is good for women. And the problem is the context of the culture that we're working with right now is unhealthy in the expectations it puts on women in terms of anything, of achievement. Because now we've told women you need to compete and be as good as you possibly can, and then we're going to introduce men into it and we're going to crush you. And do you have pro-women's sports? I don't see anything wrong with providing opportunity. Now, you might argue, and I might actually agree with you, that providing that opportunity could result in a bad course for the culture. So don't even provide the opportunity. You might be able to make a great argument for that. I don't know. But there is value to allowing your children exploration of the things that God has designed them to do. And I do not believe that God has not designed any female on the face of the earth to compete in a sport or to be physical or to express herself in the physical realm and strategy. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't see it that way. I don't see God as that two-dimensional, putting us into boxes like that. Now, do I throw a basketball into my daughter's hand and tell her, you better go be the best basketball player ever? Absolutely not. Do I provide her the opportunities and the resources to do what God has created her to do? Absolutely. But there comes a point, I think, as a father, where if you kick against the goads or you cut against the grain, you're going to end up causing more troubles with your children than guiding the exploration in the process. And I understand the other side of the argument. I really do, and I get it, because if you're in a tribalistic sense, right, we're a tribe, we're out in the middle of the jungle. What's most advantageous to the tribe? To keep the wife at home with the kids and the community and building a stable, safe home environment, or to allow her to enjoy curiosity by going out into the jungle with me where there's panthers and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. I get it. But I'm going to end this with one just kind of conclusive thought. And it rounds back to when I hear this train riding down the tracks of traditional biblical masculinity, I'm wary. And I'm in the middle of the men's movement. I get it. But I get wary because I've seen that pendulum swing way too many times to not look at it and see the red flags of, could this be where we're headed? Because let's be honest, the Middle East is a oppressive patriarchal society. I think the West, and especially Europe, was much better in understanding the dynamic between a man and a woman. And of course, the feminists look back at that as super oppressive and awful and evil. But there were protections built in for women, right? And there were expectations built in for women. But there was also a sense of dynamic between the two. There was a respect that was expected from men to women and a respect from women to men. I think the Middle East was a swing too far. It became oppressive very quickly and created a property aspect, right? I think Western civilization has done much better. But we have to be wary of, could it swing too far and become an oppressive thing that then you've diminished the value and the unique creation of the woman down to satisfaction of the man, the property of the man. And this is why that whole women should bow to men an hour a day thing got me, and I talked about it last week, is if we go down that road, you've created a arrogant position in the man who he'll run with. He'll run to the hills with that. It's a self-righteousness. It's a holier-than-thou-ness. It's a God put me in charge and I'm the head. Do not lord it over like the Gentiles do. Christ explicitly told his apostles, the greatest are the servants, the ones who come to serve. Christ himself said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. You as a man are here to serve your family. You're here to sacrifice for your family, for your wife. You are to uphold her. Do you notice Christ upholds the bride? He does not oppress the bride. He is preparing her for himself. Because how she is a reflection of him. Your bride and your daughters are a reflection of who you are. So you uphold them, you guide them, you help them, you sacrifice for them, but you help them actualize themselves in the way God intended. We are all different parts of the body. A hand cannot say to a foot, I have no need of you. That's important. That's vital, because we could get ourselves into trouble by saying, well, male has this role, female has this role, and you can't go outside of that. Because perhaps this male over here has been called to a certain place that we as a culture or society says, well, I don't know about that. Or a woman, the same thing. We need to be careful. And we need to be careful of our own mediocrity. We need to be careful of our own milquetoast positions. But we also need to be careful of the extreme positions that will draw us away from the Lord and lead us into a pride and an arrogance that is just downright dangerous. And I don't consider what I'm saying to be milquetoast or soft or squishy conservative. What I'm saying is I appreciate the extremes. They help us keep our eyes on the prize. But if we're not careful, it'll run us off the cliff. So that's my thought, my opinion. I hope you guys appreciate that. And thank you for paying attention. And there are days, guys, where we wake up and it's like, okay, Lord, what next? And sometimes I come into the office going, what am I going to talk about? You know, you got to keep things going, right? And so I appreciate that there are times where I'm just going to talk to the camera and I'm going to espouse my views one way or another, and it is what it is. But if you like this type of content, by all means, subscribe to our channels. Each platform has something unique about it that we do, right? And so whether it's X, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it's YouTube, Rumble, there's kind of something unique for each of them for the most part. And so subscribe. Click the notification bell that you need to. Comment, send us emails, reach out. We want to connect with you guys. And we want to be able to help any way we can. And if there's something you want us to talk about, by all means, let us know. Some of our best podcasts have been listener suggested. So go to theselfevidenttruth.com, get yourself some merch, get a t-shirt, buy a book, and become a monthly sponsor. By all means, please click that donation button and then become a monthly sponsor. Be a part of what we're doing. Be part of our family. We appreciate every one of you. Love all of you.